So we went to lunch and I asked him two specific questions. And the answer he gave me told me exactly why he was struggling with his first assignment as a leader. Welcome to the show. You are listening to Leader Seeds Podcast. This is your resource for high impact and healthy leadership. We have great conversations here and we cover some awesome principles. So listen into today's episode, because today I'll be talking about a conversation that I had when I took a coworker to lunch when he had his first leadership assignment and he had an obstacle, but we was able to overcome it. So listen in, I'll share with you that conversation and the lesson in that conversation. But first, let's go ahead and take a quick break for our sponsor for today's show. All right, welcome back to the show. Like I said, you're listening to Leader Seeds Podcast. Now let's jump right into the conversation today. Today's going to be a quick, short one because I'm going to share with you a powerful conversation that I had over a lunch break with a coworker at one time. And this is because he was having maybe his probably first obstacle in his first leadership assignment. And I'm going to jump right in it today. So I want you to listen in for the lesson in here. And as soon as you catch it, I want to invite you to hit that like, subscribe, and maybe even share it with a friend. At the end, I'm going to ask you to leave a kind, honest review. But the story that I want to tell you about is that there was a time that I was a banker at a major bank firm. And there was this one gentleman, one coworker that he was winning every award that you can think of. I mean, he was awesome. He was a great banker, very knowledgeable, and just killed it with every time we had like some kind of promotion or some kind of event, and his sales was through the roof. I mean, this guy was awesome, and that was his strength, every quarter after quarter. I mean, just back to back and just really beating everybody right in that, right? And though he shined in that role, I remember when I left and I went on to another leadership position and I left the company, I went somewhere else, and he was just being promoted into, towards a branch manager. And when he was getting promoted, I mean, he was coming into that promotion with total confidence. Think about it. He's a rock star, right? You're winning, award after award, and you're just killing all these contests, and you have such great momentum in your at work, right? And he loved work because every time there was an obstacle, he was just crushing it. And then I went on to the other company, and he went on to his promotion, and then I ran into him maybe a couple of weeks down the road. And I almost couldn't recognize him. Because he didn't have that same energy. Like there was confidence missing in his step. That's what I'm trying to say, right? He just looked kind of defeated. And I was at first thinking maybe it was just a tough day. I mean, hey, we all have these tough days, right? And, I seen him really quickly, and we just kind of was like, just greeted each other really quickly. I could tell he wasn't really wanting to engage in conversation. And then he came back. So I was trying to respect his space because I'm like, maybe it's not a good day right now. And he came back. And he came back direct, just jumped right in it. And he just kind of was like, how do you still love what you do? And I was a little thrown off, so I'm like, oh, you mean like in life total or, and he's like at work, leading. How do you still love leading? And I just followed up with a question because I want to learn a little bit more about where this is generating from, and I asked, well, how are things going, with the promotion? Are you still branch manager? And his only response was a simple, I still have to do it. And he never, his language was different. I mean, you probably know exactly, you might have been in his shoes, or you probably know someone in his shoes, but his language was different. His energy was different. His perspective was different. Everything about him was, you could just tell it was tough. You could see this struggle. You could see this kind of bearing on top of him. So we sat down, and, we was passing at the moment. So I asked him, I said, hey, let's go sit down. I'll buy you a coffee. We sat down, we had some coffee, and we started to talk story. And I started to learn a little bit more of what exactly was going on. Without getting into all the detail, what was happening was that when he wasn't in a leadership role, the rules to win was very different. I want you to hold on to that, write that down. When you're not in a leadership role, maybe you're winning in a season, and the way you win outside of a leadership role is very different how you win in a leadership role. This gentleman, this brother of mine, this coworker, this rock star, was killing the game outside of a leadership role. And as soon as he was put into one, everything changed. And I mean, I don't want to stay on this forever, but I really want you to capture this. Like, he was killing the game, like he was winning everything above and like far and beyond, winning everything. Okay, I think I get you know where I'm going with this, right? So to see the difference, like I said, it startled me. It startled me, but just who I am, I was really curious to see what caused the shift. And I remember at that time, 2 questions that I was taught in the beginning. And fortunate for myself, I didn't have to go through the experience that he went through, because one of my teachers, one of my mentors would ask us this question in the beginning when he was teaching us how to build successful teams. And he'd always ask us, what are you reading? And outside of a leadership role, it would serve you to know a lot about your product, right? Your product, your service, whatever it is, right? It serves you to know more about that. When he was outside of a leadership role, especially in a sales position, he knew everything about the product. He knew how to overcome an objection. He knew how to introduce it to somebody. He knew how to ask for referrals. He knew everything about the products that he sold, and he knew how to sell them well, right? That's why he did so well, right? But like I told you, when I was training on that mentor and that trainer, he'd always ask us, what are you reading? Because most people, when they're not in a leadership role, they study the product. Now, that might serve you outside of that role, right? That probably will, just like how this coworker won, how he was winning, right? He knew so much about the product. But things change when you're in a leadership role. So the one question that my mentor would ask us is, what are you reading? And when he would see what we were reading, the topics that we were reading, what we're trying to learn, he'd always say, you want to know more about your people than you know about your product. I'll say that one more time. As a leader in a leadership role, how you win is that you always want to know more about your people than you know about your product. Because you see, in order for you to win, just like Mike, that coworker, it was easy for him to win because he knew about the product, and it was all in his hands, right? He could have his plan. He could follow the plan. He could stay disciplined. It was much more in control, and he felt out of control. That was actually one of his words. I just feel out of control. Like I can't put my finger on it, he'd tell me. Now, when you ask yourself that question, do you know more about your product or do you know more about your people? Because when you're in a position to lead, you shift the game from a game of addition and it shifts to a game of multiplication. Let me explain. When you're solo, when it's just you winning in that role outside of a leadership position, you win, you're given the game plan, you achieve the game plan, and you win, right? You add value to the team. You add value to the customer or the client or whoever you're serving, right? Your volunteers, or you add value, right? Because it's just you. When you're in a leadership role, it's not just about your win. Your win is when your team wins. So how do you get your team to win? Is you know more about your people than you know about your product. It's very simple. It's very simple. I sat there and asked him those questions. I said, tell me about your product. Boom, without even hesitation, he nailed it. I mean, whoa, like he blew my mind with how much he knew about all the products and services that the branch could offer people and they could help people. And they were great services, don't get me wrong. And some is impressive, and some people fall so in love with the product that they miss the connection with the people. You see how you win in your leadership position. Now, I'm not saying don't know anything about your product. You have to have knowledge in your product. But you'll be surprised how many times the leader doesn't have to be the expert in the product, but they do have to be more of an expert in their people. What does that mean, Paul Keller? I'm glad you asked. If you can answer this question, make a list. If you're writing this down, make a list about everything you can tell me about your product or service. And as soon as you gas out, as soon as you don't have anything else, draw a line on the middle of the page, and on the opposite side, start telling me about your people. Don't just tell me their first name. Tell me their last name. Tell me their family, right? Are they married? What's the spouse's name? Do they have children? What's their names? Do they have pets? How many? Right? When is your team members' birthdays? How do they like to be recognized? Right? What do they do for fun on their days off? What? I have to know what to do for fun on the days off. If you want to win in the game of leadership, if you want to win in the role of a leader, absolutely. Think about how much things people can tell you about their product. For me, it's almost a red flag when somebody's trying to pitch me an opportunity and I'm sitting there listening and they're telling me a gajillion things about their product. And I listen and I smile and ask, what about your people? And there's a bit of a fumble. I mean, there's like maybe the canvas answer, which, oh, they're great. Our people are amazing. They're the best people ever. Everyone says that. But I mean, what about the details of your people? Like, what motivates them? What are their strengths? What are their gifts? How do they best add value to the team? Because when you understand these things, you can help people win. You see, the leader that helps people win has people that want to help the leader win. And therefore the team wins. It's the leader that struggles because they just want to win, because they can crush goals and they can go out there. And then they start looking at the rest of the team like, what's wrong with you guys? How come you can't do it? I used to sell blank to blank to blank. And, and there's a bit of a competition with the leader. And that in that situation, the leader is the lid and the leader is the cap, and nobody wants to grow bigger than the leader. And we might as well just stop all growth in the organization. So once again, we're going to ask you the questions again, and we're going to wrap up, because today we're getting right into this. As a leader, the game of winning changes because it's about knowing more about your people than you know about your product or your service. When you can start to build that list and you start to see that you start to intentionally build more on the people side, you start to win. That's exactly what we did with him. I sat down with him. I asked him on one side of the paper, tell me about your product. And he started writing it down. And like I said, it blew my mind. And then I drew a line of paper on the other side. I said, tell me about your people. And after about a handful, I think if we got that far, he was out. And I told him, let's go ahead and keep building the people side. Tell me more about your people. Learn about your people. Find out what motivates them. Find out what frustrates them. Find out how you can serve them. Find out and even like the personal things, their birthday. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know how key it is to be remembered on your birthday, a special day, when everyone else remembers you and the people you spend the most time with at work completely forget. Even though worst case scenario, they get bad news on their birthday because you didn't know their birthday. Know their birthday, know their anniversary, know these important things that matter to them. Because if it matters to them and you're leading, it should matter to you. That's it for today, but take these steps so that way you don't have to hit this obstacle in your first, second, third, or even fifth leadership assignment. That's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining us here. Like I said, The minute you found anything of value, I want to invite you to subscribe. I want to invite you to leave an honest rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or any podcast platform that you're listening on. And go ahead, share this with a friend, because our mission is to continue supporting, serving, and helping high impact and healthy leaders like yourself. That's it for today's episode. Once again, my name is Paul Keller Mossman, your leadership speaker, executive coach, and right here, your podcast host.